Hello everyone, it's Greg from Edinburgh Renaissance Fencing Academy here. Before we start today's video, I'd just like to take this opportunity to say a big welcome and thank you to all the new viewers to the channel. We have recently surpassed the 700 subscribers mark, which is a big milestone for a small channel like this one. So thank you everyone. Now on with the video. So today's topic is parrying daggers. And in particular, I'm going to discuss the design and size of those daggers commonly used in Italian rapier fencing styles of the late 16th and early 17th centuries. Now, in this period of European history, we should remember that Italian fencing theory was quite influential in other countries as well. So the sort of rapier fencing that was being practiced in places like France, England and Germany was very much Italianate in its style, or at least based on Italianate principles. So what I'm going to say has relevance outside of the Italian peninsula, as well as for Italy and the swordsmanship of Italy itself. So my motivation for producing this video is really twofold. On the one hand, I personally really enjoy rapier and dagger fencing. I find it to be both challenging and fun. However, the second factor is that I feel like there are quite a few misconceptions about parrying daggers out there in the wider HEMA and historical fencing community. So I wanted to tackle some of those ideas in today's video. Okay, so in this first part of the video, I want to analyse a few real historical examples of the type of daggers that we're talking about. Before we do that though, a quick note about nomenclature. Now, in the modern HEMA world and historical fencing world, it's common to refer to these weapons as parrying daggers. Because that's how we use them in rapier and dagger fencing. You also sometimes hear people use terms like left-hand dagger and particularly main gauche, which is the French term for simply left hand. However, according to the Italian fencing treatises, they're just daggers. They use the Italian word dagger. There's no specific name for this type of dagger. So it's just a dagger which you use in combination with a sword. Okay, so moving on, let's have a look at a few examples. Now, most of these are taken from this nice little book I have by Eric Valentine. It's called Rapiers and Their Companions. So yeah, without further ado, so this first picture here shows two nice examples. And this is really a picture that's worth remembering as we continue our discussion. So the larger dagger here has a blade of around 38 centimeters and the smaller one has a blade length of approximately 27 centimeters. And you can see they've got modestly sized quillons in the crossguard and small side rings which would sit on the outside of the hand to protect the top of the hand. So these are, as I say, really the classic two models of dagger which were in use in Italian fencing schools. So we could consider this to be a large version and a medium-sized version. Okay, next picture here. We've got, again, a slightly larger one, a blade length of around 30 centimeters this time, and the other one, again, around 27 centimeters, and very modestly sized crossguards. This next example is the smallest one. It has a blade length of only around 24 centimeters and quite small quillons and a side ring. I should also note this dagger is very similar to one that I'm quite familiar with, which is held in the National Museum of Scotland here in Edinburgh. So that's an interesting point as well. And then our final picture here, so this is a matched weapon set. This is held in the Wallace collection in London. So the dagger here has a blade length of, again, 25 centimeters and clearly designed to match the rapier next to it, which I believe has a blade length of 115 centimeters or something like that. So there you go. These daggers are relatively simple in design and not overly large, shall we say. I don't have specific weight data for these weapons, but I'm confident that they are not particularly heavy either. They're probably 500 grams or a little bit less in most cases. Okay, so next, I'd like to refer to my favorite period source for fencing, which is the treatise of Giacomo di Grassi from 1570. So I'm going to read out a short quotation to you from the text to give you di Grassi's idea and advice about parrying daggers. So he says, "As for the form that daggers should have, there is this much to be said, that in order to withstand blows from a sword they have to be strong, to encounter the sword easily they have to be long, and in order to be drawn quickly from the sheath they should be short. Accordingly, those of medium size are praiseworthy." So basically, he's saying that a medium-sized dagger, in other words, a dagger with a medium-sized blade, which is of strong construction, is the optimal weapon for this. And that's his guidance. So if we think about the examples we saw earlier, particularly that first picture, let's see it again. If the longer one of these is a large dagger and the other one is a medium-sized dagger, di Grassi was probably intending for the smaller of these two weapons to be the standard for his way of fencing. Now let's expand the picture a little bit and take a look at some diagrams from period fencing treatises. So let's start off with di Grassi's treatise itself. So if we take a look here, you can see the daggers are pretty much as he described. So the blades are of modest length and the weapons are fairly simple in construction. Simple, not too big crossguard, and in fact there are no side rings shown here. That may be an artistic device. Maybe the artist didn't want to confuse the picture by drawing in extra bits to the guard, or this may be an accurate representation of the weapons. It's hard to be sure. But let's move on to another treatise. So this is Camillo Agrippa from the 1550s. Pretty much the same thing. A modestly sized dagger with a simple, not too large crossguard, and again, no side rings shown. And then a final example from Rodolfo Capoferro's famous work of 1610 over here. Same thing again. Medium blades at best, relatively simple crossguard, not too big, and once again no side rings shown, interestingly. So basically the treatise diagrams, the actual fencing diagrams, back up what di Grassi was saying. So simple daggers with simple guards seem to be the norm as far as this evidence is concerned for what was going on in the Italian fencing schools. So the next piece of evidence to examine is a little bit of portrait evidence. So if we remember di Grassi's quote, so he said that the dagger needed to be of modest length so it was easy to draw from the sheath. Now what does that mean? Well, let's look at di Grassi's portrait. So if you look at his right hip, you can see the handle of his dagger projecting just beyond the right hip. So the idea is that's easy to draw with the right hand or with the left hand to draw across your body, assuming you already have a sword in your right hand. So this was a convenient place to have such a weapon. It's out of reach of the opponent, it's a little bit hidden. You can draw it with your dominant hand as a primary weapon or with your offhand as a companion weapon to support the action of your sword. So you can imagine if you've got a large, heavy, complex dagger weapon, then it would not in any way be convenient to wear it in the small of the back like this, and it would become difficult to draw. So if we take a look at another portrait, so this is Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. So I've chosen this one just because it's a very typical portrait of the late 16th century. And if you look carefully at his waist, he's wearing his dagger in exactly the same way as Grassi was. And if you look at other portraits of noblemen from around Western Europe from the same period, you can find the same thing. And it's notable, as much as we can judge this from just being able to see the handle, that these weapons seem to be of relatively small size. Okay, so let's bring this video to a finish by forming a kind of conclusion. So hopefully from everything you've seen so far in today's presentation, you now have a pretty good idea of the typical daggers that were being used as companion weapons in the Italian fencing schools of the late 16th and early 17th centuries. So they were kind of moderately sized and relatively simple weapons. The thing is that in the modern HEMA and historical fencing scene, most practitioners seem to prefer weapons which are longer, with more complex hilts, and which are heavier. They've got more mass overall than these historical examples. Because practitioners tend to prefer those weapons, it means that's mostly what suppliers provide. Just as an aside, it is much more difficult, ironically, to get these simple weapon designs for the practice of historical fencing than it is to get the more complex ones. It's not impossible, it's just more difficult. And this is something which slightly irritates me, to be perfectly honest. However, the wider point is, as always, when we're trying to recreate a specific historical martial art, if we want to do it properly and accurately, then we need training weapons which accurately simulate the original period armaments. So if you are using a weapon which has a longer reach, greater mass and more hand protection, it's inevitably going to change the techniques that you perform with weapon in hand. So the fact that people like Di Grassi and Capoferro, to give two famous examples, are using simple open-hilted weapons tells us something about the way they were using these daggers. So they were obviously parrying in a way which meant that even though their hand was exposed, it wasn't at a huge risk of injury. Now I'm going to make a follow-up video to this one in the near future, where we're going to examine the approaches of Di Grassi and Capoferro. So please check back in a week or a couple of weeks from the publication date of this video, and you should find the follow-up there. However, for now, it is worth noting that there were larger daggers, more complex daggers, so these designs which you find sold by HEMA suppliers are in some ways authentic, but they're just not the weapons which are shown in the treatises that I have described today. If you want to accurately recreate a style like Di Grassi or Capoferro or Agrippa or Saviolo or any of those people from that period, Fabrice is another big name, I really advise you to try to get an appropriate dagger for use as a parrying weapon. It's It's my personal belief that people who use these big, heavy, complex daggers are either looking for competitive advantage in some kind of tournament situation, or they are overly worried about injury to their hand. And the correct way to minimize the chance of injury to your hand is to use correct historical technique, not to rely on these over-engineered examples of daggers, which, let's not forget, you would be unlikely to wear with your everyday civilian clothing back in the 1500s and 1600s. They were just too bulky and inconvenient. So yeah, that's really the thought I want to leave you with today. I'll be back, as I said, in the near future at some point with a follow-up video where we're going to talk about techniques with the parrying dagger. But this video is long enough for today, so I will leave it there. But as always, try to look at primary sources and original examples of weapons if you want to accurately recreate historical fencing techniques. That's it for today. Take care, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Bye.